Welcome back. Over, gosh, so many deep dives now. We've really picked apart the human mind, haven't we?
We certainly have, from, why we make odd choices about money,
Yeah, the cognitive biases.
all the way through to trauma,
Mm.
relationships, and even, like, what does it actually mean to live a good life?
It's been quite the journey. We've looked at tiny errors in thinking, big existential questions. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and I think the risk is all this amazing knowledge stays in separate boxes, right?
Mhm.
You've got Freud's ideas over here and attachment theory there, maybe some habit stuff somewhere else.
Exactly. And that's what today is all about. This is the big synthesis. We're taking all these threads, the biases, how we attach, the impact of trauma, the insights from positive psychology, and weaving them together.
The goal is to build a single, cohesive picture. How do all these pieces fit? How do they explain who we are right now?
And crucially, how can you, listening now, use this integrated understanding to make real changes, to move towards, well, psychological freedom and really flourishing?
Think of it like the ultimate schematic, connecting all the dots. Primal drives, modern anxieties, why change feels so hard.
And then the practical tools, how to actually rewire things. Okay, so to get to flourishing, we need to start at the beginning, the foundations. What's the basic psychological setup we're all working with? Let's dive into that initial architecture, starting with some really foundational ideas, like Freud's.
Right. So for Freud, the sense of self, the ego, isn't just there. An infant starts out kind of merged with everything, all sensation.
Like, no difference between me and not me.
Pretty much, the outside world only really becomes other through loss. Freud's classic example is the mother's breast being taken away, even temporarily.
Ah, so the desired thing isn't there when I want it. It exists separately.
Exactly. That absence forces the infant mind to recognize an object out there, independent of its own will. And that's the start of this painful, lifelong process of separating me from everything else.
And boom, right away, conflict. Because Freud saw these fundamental drives, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. The big two. You have eros, the life instinct. That's the drive towards connection, building things up, preserving life, creating bigger unities.
Mm.
The libido is part of that.
Okay, the urge to connect, to build.
But then pulling the other way is the death drive, thanatos. This is an instinct, believe it or not, seeking to break down complexity, to return to a simpler, inorganic state.
Wow, okay. So a drive towards nothingness, towards quiet.
Towards stasis, yeah. Towards dissolving the tension and struggle that life inherently brings. So right from the start, we're pulled in two directions.
Mm.
Connect and build, but also find peace by dissolving. That's fundamental tension.
Constantly at war internally, and then civilization comes along and makes it worse.
According to Freud, yes, in a way. Civilization demands we restrict those drives. You can't just act on every impulse if you want to live in a society.
It makes sense. Rules, laws, social norms.
Right. And the payoff is safety, order, predictability. But the cost, Freud argued, is a loss of potential pleasure. The satisfaction you get from indulging a raw, untamed impulse is, well, way more intense than satisfying a tamed one.
So we trade intensity for security.
We do. We forego some of that primal satisfaction. And this forced renunciation, this holding back, has a really interesting kind of dark consequence. The superego, our conscience.
Ah, the internal judge. But how does holding back make the judge stronger? That seems backward.
It is paradoxical, isn't it? Initially, the conscience starts as fear of external authority, the parent getting punished, being excluded. So you renounce the drive to avoid getting in trouble.
Okay, simple conditioning.
But here's the twist Freud noticed. Every time you successfully renounce an instinctual urge, every time you hold back that aggression or desire, that act of suppression itself seems to fuel the severity of the superego.
Wait, so resisting the urge to yell at someone actually makes the internal voice that tells me I'm bad for wanting to yell?
That's the idea. The aggressive energy doesn't just vanish, it gets turned inward. It becomes part of that internal critic. The superego then demands even more renunciation. It starts punishing you not just for the act, but sometimes just for the thought or the intention.
Wow. That sounds like a recipe for guilt and anxiety. You see that in things like extreme perfectionism, maybe. That voice that's never satisfied.
Absolutely. That relentless inner critic, always demanding more, always finding fault that could be seen as this internalized aggression, the supercharged superego feeding on the very renunciations it demands. It's a difficult cycle.
Okay, so Freud gives us this picture of internal conflict, of drives and suppression. But what happens when that conflict or an external threat really ramps up? How does the body actually respond? This brings us to the polyvagal theory, right? which maps our biological survival responses.
Exactly. It's not random panic. There's a clear evolutionary hierarchy to how our autonomic nervous system defends us. Think of it like 3 layers of defense.
Layer 1.
The newest system, evolutionarily speaking, found mainly in mammals. This is the social engagement system. It uses specific cranial nerves, the myelinated vagus nerve in particular, sometimes called the vagal brake,
The brake. Why a brake?
because it actively calms us down, keeps our heart rate steady, and allows us to connect with others when we feel safe. Think about looking at a friendly face, hearing a soothing voice that engages this system, keeps us calm and connected. It's our default safe and social mode.
Okay, so social connection is literally a biological safety system. What happens when that doesn't work? When the friendly face isn't there or the threat is too big?
Then the vagal brake is released. The system can't maintain calm, and we automatically shift down to the next layer of the hierarchy,
Which is?
the older sympathetic nervous system, shared with most vertebrates. This is your classic fight-or-flight mobilization.
Adrenaline, cortisol.
Exactly. Heart pounds, breathing gets shallow and fast, muscles tense up, pupils dilate. The body is prepping for intense physical action, run away or fight back. That surge of anxiety, the jitters, that's this system kicking into high gear.
Got it. Mobilize for action. But what if you can't fight or flee? If you're trapped or the threat is just completely overwhelming?
Then we drop down to the oldest, most primitive system. This involves the unmyelinated vagus nerve, part of the dorsal vagal complex, or DVC. This system is ancient, shared even with reptiles.
And its strategy.
Immobilization, playing dead, essentially. It triggers a physiological shutdown. Heart rate can plummet, blood pressure drops, you might feel faint, or even pass out. It's the freeze or collapse response.
That sounds terrifying. And you're saying this links to trauma.
Critically, if someone experiences repeated situations where fight-flight isn't possible or doesn't work, the body can learn that this shutdown, this collapse, is the only safe option. It becomes a default survival response.
And when the body goes into these extreme states, especially shutdown, what happens to our conscious experience, our memory?
It fundamentally breaks down. Normally, a part of the brain called the thalamus acts like a chef, integrating all the incoming sensory information. Sights, sounds, smells, emotions, the sense of time passing into one coherent dish, our conscious experience.
Okay, the cook putting it all together.
But trauma disrupts the kitchen. The thalamus gets overwhelmed. The experience isn't recorded as a smooth, linear story. Instead, it's stored as disconnected fragments.
Like snapshots, a sound here, an image there.
Exactly. The smell of cologne, a pattern on the wallpaper, a specific phrase someone said, the feeling of cold. But they're not linked together in time or narrative. Time itself might feel like it freezes or stretches out bizarrely.
And this fragmentation happens because the threat signal basically bypasses conscious processing.
Precisely. Information about a potential threat takes a kind of shortcut, the low road, directly to the amygdala. Think of the amygdala as the brain's smoke detector.
Just detects danger, doesn't analyze it.
Right. It screams fire before the high road, the slower pathway to the prefrontal cortex, where we do our conscious thinking and rational analysis, even gets the full picture. So you react defensively before you fully understand why. That speed is essential for survival, but it means the conscious story-making part of the brain is offline during the worst moments.
So let's connect this back. If a child is repeatedly terrified, maybe by a caregiver, and their natural distress signals, crying, screaming, trying to get away, don't lead to help or safety.
They learn, on a deep physiological level, that their actions are futile. Their attempts to seek safety or protest the harm have no effect. This wires in what we call conditioned helplessness.
The nervous system learns nothing I do matters.
Essentially, yes. It fosters an external locus of control, the core belief that you are powerless to influence your environment or escape danger. And that deep-seated sense of powerlessness learned early on is why someone might give up very easily when facing challenges later in life. Their whole system is practically screaming, "Don't bother, it won't work anyway." It's a tragic adaptation.
Wow. Okay, so that lack of safety, that failure to feel like you have any agency as a child, inevitably shapes how we approach relationships later on. This leads us straight into attachment theory, doesn't it?
Directly. How available and responsive our primary caregivers were. Were they a source of comfort and safety? Or were they inconsistent, frightening, or dismissive? That experience lays down a blueprint for intimacy. This blueprint shapes our attachment style.
And the main styles are secure, anxious, and avoidant.
Those are the common insecure patterns, yes, alongside secure. And each style comes with a set of core needs and fears in relationships. Someone with an anxious attachment style, for example, really prioritizes closeness, connection, and reassurance. They might worry a lot about abandonment and constantly monitor the relationship
We're
temperature.
checking if things are okay.
Yeah, needing that validation. Whereas someone with an avoidance style prioritizes independence, autonomy, separateness. They might feel easily smothered or trapped by too much closeness and need space to feel comfortable.
Okay, so you can immediately see the potential for clashes there. Anxious needs closeness, avoidant needs distance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that dynamic often creates the classic anxious avoidant trap or dance. It's a really common pattern.
And for the anxious partner, this push-pull might actually feel like intense love or passion, right? But it's something else going on.
That's a crucial, often misunderstood point. When someone anxiously attached is with an avoidant partner, they often get inconsistent signals, moments of warmth followed by withdrawal, closeness followed by distance. This inconsistency keeps the anxious person's attachment system constantly activated.
Like on high alert.
Yes, cycling between hope and anxiety, relief and distress. Because the system is so activated, the highs feel really high and the lows feel devastating. The anxious person can mistakenly equate this roller coaster, the preoccupation, the anxiety, the brief, intense bursts of joy when closeness is achieved with deep love or passion. They learn that relationships should feel tumultuous and uncertain.
While the avoidant partner is doing their own thing to manage the perceived threat of too much intimacy, using these deactivating strategies.
Right. These are unconscious tactics to suppress attachment needs and maintain emotional distance when they feel overwhelmed or when the relationship starts getting serious.
Give me an example. What's a common one?
One is developing a sudden chilling effect. Just as things are getting closer, the avoidant person might suddenly fixate on a small negative detail about their partner, the way they laugh, a minor habit, a political view they disagree with slightly.
Something trivial or really.
Often, yes. But they blow it out of proportion internally. It creates a feeling of dislike or distance, effectively putting the brakes on intimacy without consciously deciding to end things. It's like finding an excuse to feel less connected.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the Phantom X? I've definitely seen that one.
Oh yeah, the Phantom X is a classic. It's a brilliant deactivating strategy, unconsciously speaking. The avoidant person starts idealizing a past partner, maybe someone they can't actually get back with.
So it's safe because it's unattainable.
Precisely. This idealized memory requires no real effort, no vulnerability in the present. By constantly comparing their current real-life partner to this perfect imagined phantom, the current partner inevitably falls short. It justifies keeping emotional distance and shuts down their own feelings of attachment in the present relationship.
So whether it's the internal critic from Freud, body shutdown from Holly Vagel, or these attachment dances, Part 1 really lays out how we're wired with these deep, often fear-based patterns that run largely on autopilot.
That's the bedrock. These systems are powerful and were initially adaptive, but they set the stage for the predictable loops that make change so difficult. Which leads us perfectly into Part 2. If Part 1 showed the basic wiring, Part 2 explores how that wiring creates these repeating cycles, these loops that actively resist our conscious efforts to change.
And a major driver of these loops is something we've touched on before, cognitive dissonance. The core idea from Leon Festinger, right? That we need consistency between what we believe and how we act.
Absolutely. Inconsistency, having two conflicting thoughts or acting in a way that contradicts a belief, creates this uncomfortable psychological tension, this dissonance. And we are powerfully motivated to reduce that discomfort.
We'll do almost anything to make it go away.
Pretty much. And often, reducing it involves a fair bit of self-deception. A classic example is after making a tough choice. Say you agonize between buying car A and car B, and finally chose car A.
Okay.
Immediately after, you'll likely start emphasizing all the great things about car A. Amazing mileage, love the color, and downplaying anything good about car B. Probably wouldn't need repairs soon anyway. You have to justify your choice to reduce the lingering tension of, did I pick the right one?
You rewrite the narrative to make your choice feel obviously correct.
Exactly. Another example is effort justification. If you go through a really difficult or embarrassing initiation to join a group, you're likely to rate that group more positively afterwards. Why? Because you have to justify the suffering you endured. It must be a really great group if I was willing to go through that.
Okay, so we adjust our beliefs internally. But we also manipulate our environment, don't we, to keep the consistency going?
Oh, massively. This is a key way we resist change. We actively seek out information and people that confirm our existing beliefs and choices.
The echo chamber effect.
Precisely. If you hold strong political views, you tend to consume news that validates those views. If you just bought an expensive item, you might avoid reviews that suggest it wasn't worth the money. We actively avoid dissonance-increasing information because it feels bad.
This also explains why sometimes forcing people to do something doesn't actually change their minds, right? The difference between compliance and real belief change.
Yes, the distinction between public compliance and private acceptance. Imagine you hate product X, but someone offers you, say, $10,000 to publicly endorse it. You'll probably do it.
For 10 grand. Yeah, probably.
But will you feel much dissonance? Probably not. Because your behavior, endorsing the product, is clearly explained by the huge external reward. You can easily tell yourself, I only did it for the money, I still think the product sucks. Your private opinion doesn't need to change.
The external justification is sufficient. So for real change to happen, the pressure needs to be less.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the clever part. If the reward or punishment is just enough to get you to perform the behavior, but not quite enough to fully justify it externally, then dissonance kicks in hard.
Because you can't just blame the money or the threat.
Right. Your mind goes, I didn't get paid that much to say this thing I don't believe, so why did I say it? Maybe. Maybe I actually do kind of believe it after all. That internal pressure to align your belief with your action because the external reason isn't strong enough, that's what can lead to genuine private acceptance, a real change in attitude. It's a subtle but powerful mechanism. Moderate pressure works best for internal change.
Okay, so dissonance tries to keep our internal world consistent, even if it requires some mental gymnastics. But then, the work on predictable irrationality shows that the starting points for that consistency are often, well, completely arbitrary and illogical. We're not the rational creatures economics used to assume we were.
Not even close. And as Dan O'Reilly and others have shown, our irrationality isn't random. It's systematic. It's predictable. A core principle is relativity. We don't evaluate things in isolation. We judge them in comparison to other things.
Like the middle option always looking reasonable.
Exactly. If you offer small coffee for $2, a medium for $4, and a large for $4.50, most people go for the large. The medium option is mostly there to make the large look like a fantastic deal in comparison. We need that contrast.
And this reliance on comparison makes us incredibly vulnerable to anchoring.
Hugely. Anchoring is where the first piece of information we receive about something, often a number, like a price, heavily influences all our subsequent judgments about it, even if that first piece of information is totally irrelevant.
Like the MSRP on a car, the manufacturer's suggested retail price.
Perfect example. Even if nobody ever pays that price, seeing that high number first makes the actual selling price seem much lower, like a great bargain. That initial MSRP acts as an anchor, pulling our perception of value upwards.
Let's use that classic experiment to really drive this home, the one about losing a concert ticket versus losing cash.
Right. So scenario one, you're going to a concert, the ticket costs $20. You get to the venue and realize you've lost the $20 ticket you already bought. Do you buy another $20 ticket?
Feels like the concert now costs $40. Probably not.
That's what most people say. Now, scenario two, same concert, ticket costs $20. You get to the venue and realize you've lost a $20 bill from your wallet sometime today. You still buy the $20 ticket.
Yeah, probably. Losing the cash feels unrelated to the concert cost. I'd still spend the $20 for the show.
And again, that's what most people say. But think about it, in both cases, you are exactly $20 poorer than you expected to be, and you're facing the decision of whether to spend $20 to see the concert. Logically, the situations are identical.
But they feel completely different because of how we mentally frame it.
Precisely. Losing the ticket makes us anchor the cost to the specific concert budget, making it feel like a $40 expense. Losing the cash gets mentally filed under general bad luck or lost money, separate from the entertainment budget. Our decisions aren't based on pure calculation. They're based on these mental accounts and the initial anchors we set.
And these kinds of biases, these mental shortcuts, are what lock us into rigid ways of thinking, aren't they? Like selection bias.
Absolutely. Selection bias is our tendency to quickly latch on to a default story or explanation and then only seek out, notice, or remember information that confirms that story while ignoring anything that contradicts it.
We find the narrative we like and then we build walls around it.
Pretty much. And this feeds directly into Carol Dweck's concept of the fixed mindset. If you have a fixed mindset, you believe your core abilities, intelligence, talent, personality, are basically set in stone.
You either have it or you don't.
Right. So when selection bias gives you a negative default story, I'm just not good at math, relationships always fail for me. Any setback, any failure, is immediately interpreted through that fixed lens. It becomes proof that the negative story is true. A bad grade isn't a sign you need to study differently. It's evidence you lack the math gene. A breakup isn't an opportunity to learn. It's confirmation you're unlovable.
There's no room for improvement in that mindset. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy fueled by the bias.
Exactly. The belief that change isn't possible prevents you from taking the actions that would actually lead to change. It's a powerful, self-perpetuating loop. Hashtag 2.3 reenactment and the drive to complete.
Okay, so we've got dissonance demanding consistency and biases setting arbitrary anchors, often leading to fixed mindsets. But perhaps the most powerful and often painful loop is the one connected to trauma, the compulsion to repeat. Freud talked about this drive being incredibly strong, almost inescapable. Why? Why would we be drawn back to situations that resemble past pain?
It seems completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? But from a biological survival perspective, there's a logic to it. Think about an animal in the wild, say a gazelle that barely escapes a lion attack.
Okay. Heart pounding, shaking.
Right. Once it gets to safety, it doesn't just instantly calm down. It needs to discharge all that mobilized fight-or-flight energy, maybe by literally shaking.
Uh-huh.
But also, crucially, its system needs to somehow process and integrate what happened. It needs to review the near-death experience, to learn from it, to figure out escape routes, to increase its chances of survival next time.
So the repetition is like practicing the escape?
In a way, yes. The body holds on to the unresolved survival energy and the fragmented memories. There's a powerful unconscious drive to somehow complete the experience to achieve the successful defense or escape that was blocked or impossible the first time around.
So when a person keeps finding themselves in relationships that mirror childhood abuse or keeps ending up in jobs with bullying bosses, they're not consciously seeking pain, but their system is trying to win this time, finally get it right.
That's a good way to put it. They're unconsciously drawn, quite powerfully, into dynamics that replicate the core elements of the original trauma. The system is desperately seeking resolution, trying to finally enact that successful escape or self-protection.
But the problem is it usually just repeats the original outcome, right? Because the underlying patterns haven't changed.
Often, yes. And part of the difficulty lies in the nature of traumatic memory itself. As we discussed with the polyvagal theory, it's fragmented. It's not a neat story. It's bits and pieces, strong emotions, body sensations.
Which can lead to this intense feeling, especially during therapy or moments of high emotion, that the memory must be the absolute 100% literal truth of what happened.
Exactly. There's often a compulsion to treat the memory fragments as if they are a perfect videotape-like recording. But clinging to that idea of literal, immutable truth can actually hinder healing. Because if the past is seen as this fixed, terrifying, unchangeable block of fact that defines you as a victim, there's no room to maneuver, no space to renegotiate its meaning. You remain trapped by that literal interpretation.
So the way out of the reenactment loop involves changing how we relate to the memory itself.
Precisely. Healing often involves accepting what some call historical ambiguities. It means recognizing that memory, especially traumatic memory, is an assembly of elements, colored by emotion, and not always a precise historical record. It's not about denying that something terrible happened.
It's about flexibility.
Yes. Letting go of the absolute need for literal certainty frees the person up. It allows them to shift the focus from just the horror inflicted upon them to also acknowledging their own resilience, their survival, the parts of them that adapted and got through it. It allows for a new narrative to emerge, one that incorporates the trauma but isn't solely defined by it. That's how the compulsion to repeat loses its power. You're no longer trying to fix the literal past. You're integrating its meaning into a new, more empowered present.
Okay, this is powerful. We've mapped the foundational wiring, the Freudian conflicts, the body's alarm system via polyvagal. We've seen the loops that keep us stuck, dissonance, biases, trauma reenactment. So the big question now, the real synthesis. How do we actively, intentionally build a different reality? How do we use all this knowledge to move towards flourishing? This is part 3. Hashtag 3.1, establishing agency and growth.
The absolute starting point has to be mindset, shifting away from that fixed mindset we talked about towards a growth mindset.
Remind us of the core difference again.
Fixed mindset sees failure or difficulty as proof of permanent limitation. I failed the test, therefore I'm stupid. Growth mindset sees the same failure as information. I failed a test. Okay, what do I need to do differently next time? How can I learn from this?
So setbacks become data points, not judgments on your fundamental worth.
Exactly. And that reframing is incredibly powerful. It builds confidence, not in some innate fixed talent, but in your capacity to learn, adapt, and improve through effort, strategy, and seeking help. It fosters agency.
But you can't just decide to have a growth mindset, especially if those old patterns are strong. You need practical strategies, right? Like building supportive habits.
Absolutely. Mindset needs scaffolding. Habit formation science gives us clear laws for building better systems. James Clear's work is fantastic here. The first law: make the cues for your desired habits obvious.
Don't rely on memory or willpower alone. Make it visible.
Right. And make it specific using implementation intentions. Don't just say, I want to meditate more. Say, I will meditate for 5 minutes at 7 a.m. on the blue cushion in the living room. That concrete plan makes it much more likely to happen.
And you can link new habits to existing ones. Habit stacking.
Yes. Anchor the new habit you want to build onto a habit you already do automatically. After I pour my morning coffee existing habit, I will sit down and meditate for 5 minutes. New habit. The coffee becomes the automatic trigger.
Okay, make it obvious, make it specific, link it. What about making it appealing? Because some good habits feel like chores.
That's the second law. Make it attractive. One technique is temptation bundling. You pair something you need to do with something you want to do. Like, you need to exercise, but you love listening to a particular podcast. You only allow yourself to listen to that podcast while you're exercising. Or you need to process emails, but you want a fancy coffee. You get the coffee while you do the emails. You link the reward directly to the less desirable task.
You leverage instant gratification for the long-term goal. Clever.
Works.
Yeah.
But underlying all this behavioral restructuring, we have to deal with that internal critic, that Freudian superego guilt, the shame that often fuels the fixed mindset, which is where self-compassion comes in. It's the direct antidote.
Shame being that feeling of, I am bad, I am flawed, not just, I did something bad.
Exactly. Shame says, I am a mistake. Self-compassion, as defined by Kristen Neff, has 3 core components to counter this. First, self-kindness. Treating yourself with the same care and understanding you'd offer a good friend who was struggling. Not harsh judgment, but warmth.
Instead of beating yourself up, you offer support.
Right. Second, common humanity. Recognizing that suffering, failure, and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. Everyone struggles. You're not alone in your flaws. Shame isolates. Common humanity connects.
That feels like a huge relief right there. It's not just me.
It's powerful. And the third element is mindfulness. Being able to observe your painful thoughts and feelings clearly, without ignoring them, but also without getting totally swept away by them. A balanced awareness.
Not over-identifying with the negative feelings.
Exactly. And here's the synthesis payoff. Research consistently shows that practicing self-compassion, especially towards your weaknesses and failures, actually gives you more motivation and confidence to improve strengthening the growth mindset than simply trying to pump up your self-esteem.
Why is that?
Because self-compassion allows you to acknowledge the failure, honestly, mindfulness, without the crushing weight of self-criticism, kindness, freeing you up to learn from it, common humanity and growth. You're not afraid to see the problem because you know you won't use it as a weapon against yourself. Hashtag tag 3.2 relational systems and conflict resolution.
Okay, so we cultivate a growth mindset, build better habits, and practice self-compassion. Now, how do we apply this new agency within our relationships where all those attachment patterns and potential reenactments play out so intensely?
The key shift is moving from unconscious protest behavior, those indirect, often blaming or passive-aggressive ways we try to get our needs met when feeling insecure, to clear, direct, vulnerable communication of our actual attachment needs.
So instead of withdrawing silently, avoidant, or getting critical, anxious, you actually say what you need.
Yes, if you have anxious tendencies and need reassurance or closeness, you learn to express that positively, not, you never pay attention to me.
Yeah.
But I feel a bit disconnected. Could we spend some quality time together tonight?
Focusing on the need, not the perceived failing of the partner.
Exactly. And if you lean avoidant and need space, you learn to communicate that respectfully. Not just shutting down or disappearing, but saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. I need about an hour to myself to process. Can we talk after that?
Let's use that Rebecca and Tom example. Rebecca is anxious. Tom is avoidant. She wants him at a family event. He doesn't want to go. How does effective communication look versus protest behavior?
Okay, protest behavior from Rebecca might sound like, You obviously don't care about my family. You always choose watching sports over supporting me. You're so selfish. That's criticism, blame, attacking his character.
Which will just make Tom withdraw more, right? Trigger his avoidance.
Almost certainly. Defensiveness and withdrawal. Effective communication, however, focuses on her feelings and needs, acknowledges his perspective, and proposes a specific, manageable solution. It might sound like, hey, I know big family things aren't your favorite, I get that, but this event is important to me, and honestly, I feel anxious going alone. It would mean a lot to me if you could just come for the first hour or two. Your being there really helps me feel supported, and I don't want us to miss out on connecting.
Wow, totally different feel. She's owning her anxiety, stating her need clearly, offering a compromise, and explaining the positive impact of his presence. She's being an agent in the situation.
Precisely. And when conflict does arise, because it will, even in healthy relationships, conflict is just data about differing needs or perspectives. Secure couples handle it differently. They have principles that actually build trust through disagreement.
What are those principles?
Things like attack the problem, not the person. Take turns speaking and listening, really listening. Try to summarize your partner's perspective to make sure you understand it. So what I hear you saying is, before you give your own view.
Yeah.
And focus on finding a small, concrete next step or experiment you can both agree on, rather than trying to resolve the entire history of the issue in one go.
It sounds manageable, less overwhelming. And starting the conversation well is crucial, right? The soft startup.
Absolutely critical. John Gottman's research highlights this. A soft startup means initiating a complaint without blame or contempt. You focus on the specific situation and your feelings about it, rather than launching a personal attack.
So instead of, you're always so messy, this kitchen is disgusting, which is criticism.
You'd say, I feel stressed when the counter is cluttered after dinner. Could we figure out a plan for tidying up together? You state the problem behavior, your feeling, I feel stressed, and make a request for collaborative problem solving. It avoids triggering defensiveness.
And it avoids Gottman's four horsemen. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling.
Exactly. Those are predictors of relationship failure. The soft startup helps you navigate around them. And the underlying principle that makes all this work, the real bedrock of constructive conflict, is the willingness to accept influence.
Meaning
Being genuinely open to considering your partner's perspective, their needs, their feelings, and allowing that to influence your own position or behavior, even if you don't fully agree. If you go into a discussion just waiting to state your case and win, you're not accepting influence. It requires flexibility, humility, potentially a relational growth mindset. Hashtag TAG 3.3, the pursuit of meaning and self-transcendence.
This is building a really comprehensive picture. We've got mindset, habits, self-compassion, relational skills. But the synthesis feels incomplete without talking about the bigger picture, the why, which brings us to meaning, purpose. Viktor Frankl's territory.
Yes, logotherapy. Frankl's experience in the concentration camps led him to a profound insight. The primary human drive isn't for pleasure, like Freud emphasized, or power, but for meaning, the will to meaning.
The search for a reason, a purpose for existence, even amidst suffering.
Precisely. He found that even in the most horrific circumstances, those who could find some meaning helping others, focusing on a future goal, finding value in their attitude towards suffering itself, were more likely to endure. Logotherapy aims to help people discover or rediscover that sense of meaning and responsibility in their lives, which Frankl saw as crucial for overcoming neurosis and finding vitality.
It shifts the focus from internal gratification to external purpose.
It does. And this idea of connecting to something larger than the self resonates with Erich Fromm's work on love. He didn't see love as just a feeling or a byproduct of drives. For Fromm, love is an action, a practice, a productive capacity.
And it had specific components.
4 key elements, yes. Care, actively working for the life and growth of the person or thing you love. Respect, seeing them as they are, wanting them to grow and unfold in their own way, not just how you want them to be. Responsibility, responding to their needs, both expressed and unexpressed, as a voluntary act. And knowledge, striving to see beyond the surface, to understand the core of the other person, to penetrate their reality.
Care, respect, responsibility, knowledge, that's a demanding definition of love. And Fromm applied this to self-love too, didn't he? Counterintuitively.
Very much so. He argued that genuine love for oneself and productive love for others are not opposites. They are fundamentally connected. The truly selfish person, Fromm said, doesn't love themselves too much. They actually love themselves too little. They are incapable of this productive love, rooted in care and respect for themselves or others. They likely hate themselves on some level.
So self-care in this sense isn't selfish. It's the foundation for being able to truly care for others.
Exactly. It's about affirming your own life, growth, and potential, which then allows you to affirm others. Now, navigating all this growth, meaning relationships inevitably involve setbacks. The world will disappoint us. We'll face rejection, failure, dissonance. We need an internal anchor.
Something to hold on to when the external validation disappears.
Yes. William James, the psychologist and philosopher, talked about this idea of the ideal social self. He said our sense of self is partly built on how others see us, our family, our colleagues, our community. But mature development involves creating an inner standard, an ideal tribunal.
An internal judge, but maybe a more compassionate one than the superego.
Perhaps. More like an internal source of validation. It's an inner refuge, a sense of your own values and worth that allows you to feel real and valid, as James put it, even when the external world withdraws its approval. Even if you lose the job or the community turns against you, this internal ideal recognition provides the necessary sustainment to keep going, to maintain your sense of self and purpose.
That feels like the ultimate integration, drawing strength from an internal sense of meaning and connection, allowing you to navigate the external world with more resilience.
That's the goal of the synthesis. Using our understanding of our wiring, our patterns, and our potential for growth to build an internal architecture grounded in meaning, secure connection with self and others, and the capacity for this productive love, allowing us to flourish even when things get tough. Hashtag outro.
So, wrapping this incredible journey up, this deep dive into synthesis, what's the main takeaway? We've woven together Freud, polyvagal theory, attachment, dissonance, habits, mindset, meaning. It seems psychological freedom isn't about achieving some impossible state of perfect rationality or totally suppressing those deep drives.
Not at all. It's really about awareness and intentionality.
Yeah.
Recognizing the deep wiring, the survival responses, the attachment blueprints, the consistency drive, seeing how those patterns play out, and then deliberately choosing to intervene.
Using tools like mindset shifts, habit design, self-compassion, better communication.
Exactly. And grounding all of that in something bigger, relational security, a sense of meaning, that Freudian productive love, it's about working with our nature, not just fighting against it.
Alfred Adler had this interesting idea, didn't he, about our lifestyle, the way we selectively perceive the world to maintain our existing, often mistaken picture of ourselves and reality.
Yes, he noted how we tend to withdraw impressions from critical review if they challenge our core narrative. We cling to the familiar story, even if it limits us.
And therapy, or deep dives like this, or expert guidance, they can shine a light on those mistaken pictures, right? Point out the flaws in the map we're using.
Absolutely. The consultant, the therapist, the book, they can point out the dissonance, the loops, the fixed mindset traps. They can highlight the mistake. But making the change, making the cure real, making the truth living in your day-to-day life, that, as Adler suggested, is always, ultimately, the individual's business. It's about taking that insight and actively using it to update the map, choose agency over helplessness, choose meaning over despair. That's the continuous work of flourishing.
The power of synthesis lies in seeing the whole picture and then choosing where and how to intervene. Okay, so for our final thought today, something for you to reflect on. We talked about how healing trauma often involves accepting historical ambiguities rather than demanding absolute literal truth about the past memory. If you truly embrace that idea that the memory is a reconstruction, not a perfect recording, how might that immediately loosen the grip of the compulsion to reenact that past scenario in your present life, especially in your relationships?
How does letting go of literal certainty free you up right now?
We'll leave you with that question. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive synthesis.